Chapter 7, Theories of Cognitive Development. Let us begin our topic with the brain cells and the region. Myelination is a process in which cells of the brain and nervous system are covered with an insulating layer of fat cells. This increases the speed at which information travels or goes through the nervous system. There are also important facts that we must know about the process of myelination. These includes, first, myelination in the areas of the brain related to hand-eye coordinations is not complete 4 years of age. Second, myelination in the brain areas that are important in focusing attention is not complete until the end of the primary or the elementary days of a child. Hypnosis, on the other hand, is another important aspect of the brain's development. At the cellular or the dramatic increase in connection between neurons or the nerve cells. It called hypnosis because it is the tiny gaps of neurons where connections between neurons are being made. In a most recent study of Brown and Jernigan at 2012 that used sophisticated brain scanning techniques, children's brains were shown to undergo substantial anatomical changes between the ages of 3 and 15. However, some studies like Lerner et al. Or the group of Lerner at 2005, where the amount of brain material in some areas can nearly double in a year, followed drastic tools of tissues as needle cells are being purged in the brain or continues to reorganize itself, meaning it's reorganizing alone. In some cases, rapid growth in the frontal lobes or the language processing and the long-term memory and parietal lobes or the spatial location occurred from the ages 6 through puberty. One of the captivating or the interesting discoveries about the adolescent's brain focuses on the development stages and the areas that involve emotion and higher level cognitive functioning. The amygdala is a region of the brain that handles the processing of information about emotion, where the prefrontal cortex is especially important in higher level functioning. Researchers have discovered or have found out that the very last part of the brain to mature or to grow is the prefrontal cortex, where the planning, the setting priorities, the suppressing impulses, and weighing the consequences of one's actions is taking place. There are two theories in understanding cognition or perception are being presented in this chapter. Those are the Jean Piaget's cognitive development theory and Lev Vygotsky's social historical theory of the cognitive development. Let's proceed and talk about the cognitive process. Piaget's theory describes the cognitive development of children. Cognitive development involves changes in a cognitive process or a cognition referring to the mental processes involved in gaining knowledge and comprehension. This cognitive process includes thinking, knowing, remembering, judging, and problem solving. These are higher level functions of the brain and encompasses or enclose language, imagination, perception, and planning. In Piaget's view, early cognitive development involves processes based upon actions and later progresses into changes into their mental operations. The key concepts. Let's begin the key concepts with schemas. Schemas are described both the mental and physical actions involved in understanding and knowing. Schemas are categories of knowledge and also the process of obtaining or gaining the knowledge. As our experiences happen, this new or fresh information is used to modify, add to, or change previously existing schemas. For example, a child may have a schema about a type of a flower if the child's sole or only experience has been with yellow flowers. She might believe, or the child might believe, that all flowers are yellow in color. Suppose then that a child may encounter a red flower. The child will take in this new information, modifying the previously existing schema to include this new and fresh information. So she might believe that all flowers are yellow in color. Now let's go ahead and proceed with the assimilation. Assimilation is the process of taking in or absorbing in information into our previously existing schemas. This process is somewhat subjective. When we say subjective, it is somewhat based on or influenced by personal feelings like taste or opinions, because we tend to modify our experiences on the information somewhat to fit or be compatible with our pre-existing beliefs. For example, a child may have a schema about a type of an animal, such as a dog. If the child's so experience has been with small dogs, a child must believe that all dogs are small, furry, and have 4 legs. And seeing a dog in the next time and labeling it as a dog is an example of assimilating the animal into a child's dog schema. However, it might be changed as the child grows older. Another aspect of adaptation involves changing or altering our existing schemas or knowledge in light of new information, and that process is called accommodation. Accommodation involves altering existing schemas or ideas as a result of new information or new experiences. New schemas may also be developed during this process. It is the cognitive process of revising existing cognitive schemas, perceptions, and understanding so that new information can be incorporated or can be absorbed. This happens when the existing schema or existing knowledge does not work and needs to be changed to deal with a new subject or situation. Now let us proceed with the next key concept, which is the organization. From the word itself, organization, it is the concept of grouping isolated behaviors into a higher order, more smoothly functioning cognitive system. The grouping or the arranging of items into categories. The use of organization improves long-term memory, continual refinement, or the process of removing impurities or unwanted details of this organization is an inherent part of the development. Jean Piaget's believe that all children try to strike a balance between assimilation and accommodation, which is achieved through a mechanism Piaget called equilibration. As children progress to the stages of cognitive development, it is important or it is a need to maintain a balance between applying previous knowledge or assimilation and changing behavior to account for new knowledge, which is accommodation. Equilibration helps explain how children are able to move from one stage of thought or idea to the next.
Hey everyone, so let's talk about Piaget's stages of cognitive development, which is this means how children think, explore, and figure things out. It is the development of knowledge and skills. So, ibig sabihin, ito yung stages na kung paano mag-isip ang mga bata, paano nila tuklasin yung mga bagay-bagay na nakapaligid sa kanila. At ito ay kasama sa pag-unlad ng kanilang kakayahan at kaalaman. First one is the sensorimotor stage, which means the first stage of Piaget's theory lasts from birth to approximately age 2 and is centered on the infant trying to make sense of the world. During the sensorimotor stage, an infant's knowledge of the world is limited to their sensory stimuli. Children utilize skills and abilities they were born with, such as looking, sucking, grasping, and listening to learn more about the environment. Madaling salita, nakakakuha ng kaalaman ang mga bata sa pamamagitan ng kanilang pandama kung ano yung nararamdaman nila, na-observe nila sa paligid at sa paggalaw ng motor. Nawag ni Piaget ang yugtong ito na sensory motor dahil sa pamamagitan ng pandama at kakayahan sa motor, ang mga sanggol ay nagkakaroon ng kaalaman, ng pangunahing kaalaman na nakukuha sa nakapaligid sa kanila. Substages of sensory motor divided into 6 parts. The first one is the reflexes. The child understands the environment purely through reflexes, inborn reflexes, such as sucking and looking. So, nangangahulugan lamang na ito ay hindi sinasadya o nangyayari nang hindi sinusubukan ng iyong baby. Second one is the primary circulation reaction. 1 to 4 months old baby. Example of this is a child suck his thumb by accident and then later, it may intentionally repeat the action. Kung kaya-aya ito sa kanila, uulit at uulitin nila yung mga bagay, yung mga pagkilos na gusto na nilang gawin. So next is the secondary circular reactions. 4 to 8 months, the child becomes more focused in the world to begin to intentionally repeat an action in order to trigger a response in the environment. So, ang mga bata ay nagsisimula ng gumamit ng objects to learn about the world. This process minsan nagagawa ng bata ng hindi inaasahan, but the baby will enjoy it, so lagi niya na itong gagawin. Halimbawa, pinagpipindot niya yung tumutunog na laruan, matutuwa siya, or lagi niya na itong pipindutin kasi natutuwa siya. So nagkakaroon siya ng learning na some toys are able to produce sounds. So kahit sa mga hindi tumutunog, gagawin niya ito. So next is the coordination of reactions. Coordination of reactions, children will begin exploring in the environment around them and will often imitate and observe behavior of the others. So, it happens when a child is around 8 to 12 months. Dito, sa stage na ito, observant ang bata na they are learning through imitation at this stage. Infants' behavior becomes goal-directed as sa pag-abot ng bagay na gusto nila. Halimbawa, Gusto niya yung car tapos may nakaharang na isang toy, blocking the car. They know na itatabi or ipupush niya yung nakaharang. Dito din, they will able to recognize certain words and respond to them. Halimbawa, clap, beautiful eyes. Dito din nagsisimula ang utterance nila ng simple words like mama and papa. Tertiary circular reaction, 12 to 18 months, children begin a period of trial and error experimentation. For example, a child may try out different sounds or action as a way of getting attention. So, the toddler is considered as little scientist sa stage na to dahil they begin to explore the world in a trial and error manner. Marami silang sinusubukan. Halimbawa dito ay may hahagis silang toy, para makita kung anong mangyayari sa laruan. Dito, critical ang kanilang safety. Kasi masyado silang curious, pero dahil sa active engagement nila sa pag-explore, dun sila natututo. Ang last sa substages ng sensory motor is yung early representational thought, 18 to 24 months. Children begin to develop symbols to represent events or objects in the world. So, Piaget's believed that an important cognitive accomplishment in infancy is object permanence. So, ang object permanence ay ang ability ng cognitive ng bata to retain the color and the actual physical component ng object kahit hindi niya ito nakikita. So, kapag hindi niya ito nakikita, nagwawala siya or umiiyak. So, para maintindihan niyo ng bata na andyan lang yung object, kahit di niya ito nakikita, mahalaga na mabuo ang mental representation na ito sa isip ng bata. Let's proceed to pre-operational stage. This is the second stage in Piaget's theory of cognitive development. During this period, children are thinking at a symbolic level but are not yet using cognitive operation. So, ang capabilities ng thinking ng bata sa stage na ito ay pre-operations. Ibig sabihin, ang mind ng bata ay not yet ready to use logic or transform, combine, or separate ideas. So, sa stage na ito, they are more like symbolic. Halimbawa, ginagawa nilang taong bahay ang manika, yung walis, ginagawa nilang kabayo. So, dito sa stage na ito, highly encourage ang role-playing or they will act like someone else. Halimbawa, police or doktor. Pre-operational stage, under niya ang egocentrism at conservation. So, let's talk about egocentrism first. So, egocentrism refers to the developmental stage that is characterized by the unconsciousness of self and the lack of differentiation. So, it refers to the child's inability or wala pang kakayahan to understand things from another person's point of view. So, dito, akala ng bata, lahat ng naririnig niya or nararamdaman ay parehas ng naririnig at nararamdaman ng iba. Di ba pag ang bata umiiyak, bibigyan mo lang siya ng laruan or paborito na niyang food, tatahimik na siya. Same as kapag may nakikita siyang umiiyak na bata, like her sister or brother, iaabot niya yung favorite niyang toy para tumahan ito. Pangalawa ay conservation. It refers to logical thinking ability that allows a person to determine that a certain quantity will remain the same despite adjustment. So, according to Jean Piaget, being able to conserve mean understanding that a quantity doesn't change kahit ito ay putulin, ikalat, or ilipat. Like, halimbawa, yung isang basong tubig, inilipat mo sa isang pitcher, the volume doesn't change. Walang pagbabago, walang may iba. So, that's all. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you are watching this report. My name is Joe Mark A. Culesio. This is the continuation of our report, Team Green. Okay, so the previous reporter presents about the Piaget stages of cognitive development. We learned to her that the first stage of cognitive development was sensory motor stage. This was from the birth approximately to the age of 2. This is where the children learned how to look, suck, grasp, listen, and to learn more about the environment. We learned as well from our previous presenter that the number 2 stage was the pre-operational stage. This occurs between 2 to 6 years old, and this is where the language develops. So, this time I am going to discuss about the concrete operational stage. What do we mean by this? Okay, concrete operational stage. From the word itself, concrete, it means sa Tagalog, solid, matigas, matibay. Then let's find out the meaning of concrete operational stage according to our book. The book says concrete operational stage begins with age of 7 to 11. So basically, these are the students from grade 1 to grade 6, right? Okay, in this stage, children gain a better understanding of mental operation. They begin thinking logically about concrete events, but have difficulty understanding about the abstract or hypothetical concept. So, as the lesson goes by, I hope that we can learn more about what is concrete operational stage. It is very self-explanatory. Children can now reason logically about concrete events and classify objects into different sets. Alam na ng bata kung alin ang malaki, maliit, matigas, mababa, mahaba, or maiksi. Alam na rin kung ano yung maitim or maputi at iba pang mga basic comparison. I am going to show you a short video and let us notice the example of concrete operational stage.
I'm going to pour blue water into each of these cups, and you're going to have to tell me when when they have the same amount, okay? Okay, tell me when this one is the same.
The same.
The same? Those two are the same now?
Yeah.
Okay. They're the same? Good.
The white is the same.
Good. Okay, now watch this. We're going to take the blue water from this glass, and we're going to pour it into this glass. Now, does this glass have more water? Does this glass have more water, or are they the same?
Has more water.
This one has more water?
Yeah.
Can you tell me why?
Because that one's higher than that one.
That one's higher than that one. Right.
So, what we observe about the short video, as we noticed, the child was able to compare and to reason out concretely. He is able to present his ideas and events more flexibly and logically. Piaget determined that children in the concrete operational stage were fairly good at the use of inductive logic. Inductive logic involves going from a specific experience to a general principle. Halimbawa, kapag nakakasama or nahahawakan ng bata ang pusa at lagi siyang nahahatching, kumakati yung ilong, namumulang mata, sa gayon naiisip ng bata na meron siyang allergy doon sa pusa. So basically, ang cause ay ang effect noon ay every time na makikita ng bata yung pusa ay ilalayo niya ito sa kanya, itataboy niya ito. So I hope that you understand it. Let us proceed. Other key characteristics. So some important vocabulary that we should remember with regards to concrete operational stage. Number one, seriation. The child appreciates a relation among the different size of the objects. Number two, classification. Classification is simply grouping properties as it relates to other types. This is important concept of kids to comprehend, specifically to solve problems. An example of classification would be a child's ability to group specific object based on color, shape, size, amount, or similarities. So this is the stage where the child was able to, to compare to specific kung ano yung kulay, kung ano yung shape, at amount nung isang bagay, yung kanilang pagkakaiba. So, the next vocabulary that we should remember is the reversibility. One of the most important development in the stage is an understanding of reversibility or awareness that action can be reversed. An example of this is being able to reverse the order of relationship between mental categories. An example of reversibility is that a child might be able to recognize that his or her dog is a Labrador and a Labrador is a dog and that a dog is an animal. So the formal operational stage begins approximately from age 12 to adulthood. So meaning talagang nagbibinata na or nagdadalaga na hanggang sa pagtanda itong formal operational stage. During this time, people develop the ability to think abstract concept. So, yung mga skills such as deductive reasoning and systematic planning. In deductive reasoning, logic requires the ability to use general principle to determine a particular outcome. Science and mathematics often require this type of thinking about hypothetical situations and concepts. So sa stage na ito, natututo ang mga bata na mag-solve ng mga problems, mag-isip ng mga idea, or kung ano ang magiging resulta kapag ginawa nila yung mga bagay na ito. So this type of thinking is hypothetical situation. So what is hypothetical situation? Ito yung mga situation kung saan nakakaisip sila ng mas malalalim na mga desisyon or solusyon sa isang bagay. Dito pumapasok yung mga abstract ideas like yung mga feelings o yung kanilang mga nararamdaman o kanilang mga saloobin mas nailalabas nila ng maayos. Okay, let us proceed. In formal operational stage, the ability to systematically solve a problem in logical and methodological way emerges. So, ano ba ibig sabihin nito? Sa stage na ito rin, ang mga bata ay they are able to quickly plan and organize approach to solve to a problem solving. So, mas mabilis silang nakakaisip ng mga solusyon sa isang problema. There are stages of formal operational stages. Number one, formal stage, which begins from age 11 to 14 years old. This is the stage where abstract thought, logical, metacognition, and hypothetical reasoning occur. So let us chop it one by one. Sa abstract thought, thinking that follows reality to be represented by symbols that can be manipulated mentally. Example, they're able to create things, solve simple problem, and analyze situation. Yun ang meaning ng early formal stage sa abstract thought. Sa pagdating naman sa logic thinking, thinking that is more orderly and more systematic. Halimbawa, kapag natalo ang bata sa isang laro, hindi na siya umiiyak, nakakatanggap na siya ng pagkatalo. Naiintindihan niya na yung pagiging sports. So it means sa stage ng 11 to 14 years old, mas nagiging matanda na yung pag-iisip ng isang bata or ng isang tao. Sa metacognition, this is the stage being able to analyze one's own thought. So yung mga isip, yung mga naiisip niya ay mas na-analyze niya na kung ano ba yung kinalalabasan, kung ano ba yung magiging resulta. Next, sa hypothetical reasoning naman, it is forming conclusion based on hypothetical possibilities, can solve the problem or can formulate idea step by step. Okay, after early formal stage, we do have later formal operational stage. This was about 15 to 19 years old. This includes propositional logic, individual thinking patterns, and scientific reasoning. The ability to comprehend systems of symbols. So let us chop it one by one. Sa abstract thought, youths become capable of understanding religious symbolism. They have the ability not only in problem solving or problem making, but also in problem solving. When it comes to logic, higher levels of logic may be mastered, such as propositional logic. When it comes to metacognition, adolescents get better at analyzing their thought processes as they work through a problem. When it comes to hypothetical reasoning, they think like a scientist as they are able to establish plan for a solving problem. This is the end of my report. I hope that you learned a lot from it. Again, this is Jomark A. Colesio, and now let us proceed to the next reporter. Bye!
Good day, everyone. So let's talk about Lev Vygotsky Theory of Cognitive Development. So kilalanin mo natin kung sino itong si Lev Vygotsky. He was a Soviet psychologist. When we say Soviet, it's elected government council in communist country like Russia. So he was a Russian. And psychologist naman, it is a person who specializes in study of mind, behavior, or even in treatment of mental, emotional, and behavioral development. And he was of his work in psychological development in children. He was then a Russian teacher. He was also the first to examine how our social interaction influence our cognitive growth. Ito naman ay Vygotsky's theory assumption. When we say assumption, this is what we think in advance. Ika nga, advance mag-isip. So, ito. Live believes that social interaction is central of learning. So, dapat makipag-socialize na tayo para ma-develop ang ating social learning. Like, pagbata pa, kailangan talaga natin ipalaro sa ibang bata para maka-adapt ng ibang learning. Ganun ang way of social development. He emphasized the concept of instructional scaffolding, which allows the learner to build connection based on social interaction. Meron din siyang mga inadapt na assumption to formulate his theory. Like, activity generate thinking. Todo yun, ang pag-iisip ay hindi kaagad nakakagawa ng aksyon, kundi ang pag-action mo ay nakakalikha ng kaisipan. So, mental development is the process of children's kung saan sila nakaka-adapt ng transaksyon sa kanilang environment. Next is development advanced by dialectical exchanges. From the word dialectic, this is a process of examining issue using very careful steps. A thesis or argument is offered followed by antithesis or counter-argument. Next, development is a historical process within cultural context. Ito yung model na inadapt ni Vygotsky para mag-formulate ang development ng bata. Dahil importanteng maging familiar tayo sa nature ng cultures, historical background dahil ang environment na kasanayan ng bata, ay yun ang kukumpronta ng mga oportunidad na kailangan para maging unique to that culture. So let's go to the development of thought and language. First, as the child grows up, thought and language meet and overlap. This represent verbal thought. Next, thought and language never completely overlap. Meron talagang natiling non-verbal thought. Children's informal and formal education in language strongly influences the level of conceptual thinking they reach. So, like Piaget, Vygotsky developed a theory explaining how children develop their thought process. Ito yung kanyang conceptual development. Stage 1, thinking in unorganized congeries or heaps. Begin by the trial and error stage. The grouping of disparate objects together is the first step of concept formation for the young child. This step determined by the spatial position of experimental object. Finally, the steps ends with unstable syncretic image. Stage 2, thinking in complex. This stages is comprised of 5 phases. So number 1, associative complexes. This is understanding of an object that is linked to the nucleus of the group to be built. The child can make any concrete associative relationship by similarity or by constant. Next, in collection complexes, there is no hierarchical bond between the various characteristics. Heterogeneous complementarily, for example, a glass, spoon, and plate. 3. Chain complexes focus on objects that have nothing in common but parts of the same chain on the strength and elements. For example, child tried to imitate animal. Animals sound like dog, wolf, cat, meow, etc. Maybe the same sound he or she vocalized when milk is accidentally split. 4. Diffuse complexes, where the relationship between objects is marked by the fluidity of the attribute with still another of its elements. 5. Pseudo concept complex refer to the words that externally look like a concept, but inside it is a complex. This is a bridge between concrete thought by intuitive images and abstract thought of a child. So, dumako tayo sa stage 3. And the last conceptual development ni Vygotsky, stage 3, thinking in concept. These stages where the child began to operate with concept to practice conceptual thinking before being aware of the nature. Of this operation, synthesis must be combined with analysis.
Good day, classmates. I'm Janet Espanyol Corpus, a second-year student. Today's video is on the fascinating topic of the zone of proximal development created by Lev Vygotsky. We're going to discuss what the zone of proximal development is and also give example as it relates to learning. This video also contains an explanation of scaffolding learning theory. The two concepts are closely related and often taught together. The zone of proximal development created by Lev Vygotsky. Good day, everyone. I'm your reporter for today. I'm Janet Espanyol Corpus, a second-year student. We're gonna do example, we're gonna talk about how this applies to your own life, to anyone's life, because we've all been teaching something to someone else and also in the role of being a student. So it could have been whether you taught someone on how to cook, how to bike, how to read, or do algebra. Whatever it is, we're all taught somebody something, and we've also been on the receiving end. And one of the key concepts is about the zone of proximal development as it relates to learning. Most teachers would probably agree with Vygotsky's viewpoint that it is their job to move the child's mind forward. To do this, they must directly teach children new concepts, not wait for them to make their own discoveries. And that, at the same time, however, teachers know that they cannot teach any concept to any child. As a future educator, not only to know your content, you have to know how to express, teach, and explain. And part of that is understanding the gap between what you know and where you bring your learner to. The way I understand the zone of proximal development is that I will give you an example. So here. Okay. There is a boat between the two shore. So you are on the one shore, you have understanding, you have skills, you have knowledge in your area, and the learner is on the other side. And there's a big gap between. So may malaking gap na namamagitan sa inyo, and you want that learner onto your shore. Because we are not gonna do everything for them. That's not necessary. Sometimes all we have to do is words of encouragement, and hindi naman sa lahat ng pagkakataon yan ang hinahanap ng isang learner. So lagi nating iisipin is what I can do, anong pwede kong gawin para matuto siya, ano ang mga pwede kong gawin na new concepts para maintindihan niya, so that the learner gains level of understanding whatever topic it is. Okay, now this zone of proximal development relates specifically to what somebody can achieve with outside guidance. Now, we all call there by a teacher, a coach, a parents, whatever words you wanna use, and any sorts of scenarios. There's a person know a lot of things than the other. So the teacher thinks about how big is this gap between what needs to be known, what is not known, and how much guidance do I need to give in any particular situation. Okay, let's say you actually teaching a child on how to ride a bike. Okay, you want to know your learner, right? Kapag alam mo na almost 90% na marunong na siyang magbike, so hindi na niya need ng masyadong words of encouragement, then don't do anything for them. It's actually hurting them instead of helping them. So think about the zone of proximal development. Okay, so they don't need a lot of intervention to guide from me. So all I need to provide situation is a little words of encouragement. You might say something like, I know you can do it. Konting push pa. Kayang-kaya mo na yan. Matututo ka sa skills na gusto mo. Sometimes, that's all need a lot of times. And may ibang tao naman na kailangan is more than that, right? Maybe you need to point out things verbally for them. Okay, watch out those currents on the left side, or because of this situation, you need to go right and make a hard left. So you're giving them some cues, but then mostly letting them do it on their own. And the most extreme form of intervention, sometimes it's really necessary when the learner is new. You have to demonstrate it, or so maybe you get into that bike and show them how to ride the bike. Hanggang everyday nyo nang ginagawa, and less intervention na ang need ng isang learner. You can just give verbal cues hanggang matuto sila on their own. Okay, the main goal of zone of proximal development is to help the learner to be totally independent on certain things without verbal cues or guidance, because Vygotsky believed that when a learner is on the zone of proximal development for the particular task, providing appropriate assistance will give the learner enough of a boost to achieve the task. Okay, another term that you may heard is called scaffolding. Now, scaffolding in zone of proximal development is often good together, and you could think scaffolding just like you would like the actual scaffolding that you're building. It supports system, and if you will no longer needed, it's not necessary. The good benefits of scaffolding is think about is as a tool, and more specifically, what tool do you want to use for that particular learner, because for anything that you're teaching, there's a lot of tools available. And think about it, what is the best type of tool for my learner? And that learner may also have different learning styles. A lot of times, the tools, the scaffolding, and the ladder need to match up with not only where your learner is that, but you also think about what the learner learns best. As the learners gains more confidence and understanding in area that you're teaching, you're adjusting the scaffolding and the tools you using appropriately to that learner. And the better you are teaching, more independent the learner becomes. And you also empowering this person to take on new skills and be confident that they can learn those new skills without your encouragement, without you even need to be there. And that's the ultimate goal of scaffolding and the zone of proximal development. Child development in developing countries. Developmental potential in the first 5 years for children. Bakit nga ba mahalaga ang development ng isang bata in the first 5 years ng buhay niya? Study shows that 85% of a person's brain is developed by the time they are 5 years old. Estimated that over 200 million children under 5 years are not fulfilling their developmental potential. Most of these children live in South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. So what are the factors affecting a child development potential? Number 1 is poverty. 2 is malnutrition. 3 is poor health. And the last is unstimulating health environment. How can these factors be improved? The first UN Millennium Development Goal is to eradicate extreme poverty and hunger. And the second is to ensure that all children complete primary schoolings. So improving early child development is clearly an important step to reaching these goals. The study shows about how many children younger than 5 years in developing countries are exposed to multiple risks, which detrimentally affect their cognitive, motor, and socio-emotional development. So what role do you, as a teacher, have in helping young children? So, I will support them and I will give a helping hand, sumali sa mga organizations na nag-i-encourage and nag-motivate ng mga pamilya and ng mga children na mag-aral. Okay, again, I'm your reporter. I'm your last reporter, Janet Espanyol Corpus, a second-year student. So, thank you sa pakikinig po and mag-iingat po kayo. God bless.